Imagine sailing 2,300 kilometers across open ocean in a small boat. And you're carrying not just survival gear, but something delicate, something sacred, a grain.
Yeah, it sounds almost unbelievable.
And that's what we're diving into today, a really groundbreaking discovery of ancient rice found in a cave on Guam in the Mariana Islands.
And it's changing how we think about these early Pacific voyages.
Exactly. It's not just about old food. This discovery seems to solve a mystery that's thousands of years old. It suggests these voyagers didn't just drift there.
No, it looks like they planned these huge journeys, and they brought culturally important things like this rice, not just stuff to eat every day.
So today we're unpacking this amazing study. It was just published in Science Advances to see how this tiny grain tells such a big story about, well, some of humanity's most ambitious ancient voyages.
What's really fascinating, I think, is how just one archaeological find can suddenly bring together, decades of research from all different fields. It's like it connects the dots on how the Pacific was first settled. For ages, scholars have been debating the basics. When did people first reach the Marianas? Where exactly did they come from?
The ancestors of today's Chamorro people.
Precisely. And how did they manage that crossing? I mean, over 2,000 kilometers east of the Philippines. Was it accidental, or did they know where they were going?
And how did they survive? What did they eat on the way? And, once they got there, so many questions.
For decades, yeah. Were they just unlucky sailors blown off course? Or did they have this incredible sailing knowledge we just didn't fully grasp?
And this is where the new discovery gets really interesting. It seems to give us some pretty powerful answers, suggests, well, a remarkable level of planning.
We've known for a while, archaeologically speaking, that the Marianas were settled about 3,500 years ago. That date's been pretty solid.
Okay.
Then just a few years back, in 2020, ancient DNA analysis from Guam confirmed what archaeologists and linguists were already thinking, that the first settlers came from the central or northern Philippines. And you can trace their ancestry, both genetically and linguistically, even further back, all the way to Taiwan.
Wow. So Taiwan is the homeland for both their language and their genes.
That's the picture, yes.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this rice puzzle. Because rice has this really long history, spreading across Asia.
Right. It goes way back.
Way back. Domesticated in central China maybe 9,000 years ago. Then Neolithic farmers carried it south along the coast to Taiwan, then into island Southeast Asia, and eventually out into the Pacific.
That migration basically laid the groundwork for the huge Austronesian world we see today.
Absolutely. Nearly 400 million people, Taiwan to New Zealand, Madagascar to Easter Island. It's incredible. We see the earliest rice in Taiwan about 4,800 years ago, northern Philippines 4,000 years ago, Sulawesi 3,500 years ago.
So, okay, if rice spread like that, why is finding it in the Marianas 3,500 years ago such a big deal? Why was it unexpected?
Well, because for the most part, Pacific Islanders historically relied on things like breadfruit, bananas, coconuts, taro, yams, not rice.
Ah.
And rice is actually pretty difficult to grow in many Pacific environments. The soil, the rain, the land itself, it's often just not suitable. Kind of tricky.
So it wasn't a natural fit everywhere.
Not at all. And even the early historical records, say from the 1500s, 1600s, they noted that Guam and the Marianas were, well, unusual in that part of the Pacific because they had rice.
Huh. So even back then it was noted as different.
Yes, but those same records called it rare. Highly valued, reserved for special occasions, ceremonies, maybe given to people near death. Definitely not the everyday staple food.
So that limited evidence just created more questions, like when did it really arrive? Was it ever a staple or always special?
Exactly. And researchers looked for it. For more than 10 years, they searched open archaeological sites across the Marianas and found basically nothing conclusive from that early period.
Nothing.
The only evidence they had was much younger, from what's called the Latte period, maybe 1,000 to 700 years ago. Thousands of years after people first arrived.
Which makes this new find even more significant.
Precisely. The breakthrough happened at Ritidian Beach Cave in Guam. It's a protected site, part of the Guam National Wildlife Refuge. And crucially, it wasn't bombed during World War II.
Oh, that's huge for preservation.
It is. So those initial cultural layers, dating right back to 3,500 to 100 years ago, were intact. And the science they used is really cool. Phytolith analysis.
Phytoliths. Those are the tiny silica things in plants that stick around after the plant decays.
You got it. Microscopic silica structures. And they found lots of them. Abundant rice husk and leaf phytoliths. right on the surfaces of ancient pottery.
Okay, but how did they know the rice wasn't just, like, mixed into the clay when they made the pots as a temper?
Good question. That was the one thing they had to rule out. They used detailed microscopy, micro-CT scans, thin-section petrography. Basically, they looked really closely,
Yeah.
and they found no evidence it was used as temper. No carbonized bits inside the clay, no telltale gaps left by burnt plants, nothing like that.
Okay, so not temper. What about contamination? Could it have gotten onto the pots later?
They checked that too. Analyzed the sediment around the pottery. The rice phytoliths were clearly associated with the use of the pottery, stuck to the surfaces, not just mixed in the dirt layers later on.
Wow. Thorough.
Very. And the dating holds up. Radiocarbon dates from charcoal, food scraps, even corals found in the same layers all consistently point to that 3,500 to 3,100 year ago time frame for occupation.
So the rice was definitely there, definitely early, and definitely associated with these pots. Which brings us back to, what were they doing with it?
Right, and this is where it gets even more interesting. Ritidian Beach Cave, the RBC site, had loads of these rice phytoliths. High percentages, over 60% in some samples. Different types, from husks, leaves, clearly rice.
But other nearby sites didn't.
Exactly. They checked other spots right near Ritidian, like Star Cave, and another site called Unai Baypat on Saipan, and those places. Hardly any rice phytoliths, mostly palm types.
So it really highlights something special happening with rice, specifically at Ritidian Beach Cave.
It points to a unique role for rice there, yeah? Which makes you ask, like you said, why bring this difficult crop all that way if it wasn't a staple? And why does it show up so strongly in this one cave?
It has to be something more than just food.
Absolutely. And the cave setting itself is probably the biggest clue. In Chamorro traditions, caves are sacred. They're places for spiritual practices, offerings, talking to ancestors, rites of passage.
Ah, so the location itself suggests ritual.
It fits perfectly. And it lines up with those historical accounts we mentioned, rice or phi, being rare, valued, used for ceremonies, funerals, big life events, not daily meals.
Okay. And the archaeology inside the cave supports this, too.
It does. The pottery bowls they found, small, like 5 to 20 centimeters across, think single-serving, special offerings, not big communal food pots.
Right, not for feeding a crowd.
And the food remains in the cave weren't typical household scraps, like common clams. Instead, they found unusual shellfish, turtle bones, bird bones, things that might be associated with special meals or offerings.
And fancy pottery, too.
Yeah, finely decorated pottery, shell ornaments, pendants, maybe ceremonial items. Plus, people didn't seem to live in the caves. Their houses were elsewhere. They likely came to the caves specifically for these non-residential ritual activities.
Even the grinding stones were different.
Right. They found mortars made on bedrock shelves outside the caves, not the portable kind you'd find at a house site used for everyday food prep. It all points away from daily domestic use.
And there was that other find, burnt rice over burials on another island.
Yes, on Asuncion.
Yeah.
That wasn't dated precisely, but it suggested ceremonial use, too. This new study gives that idea much deeper historical roots, potentially right back to the first arrivals.
So the conclusion is pretty strong then. Rice wasn't a staple, it was ceremonial, symbolic, culturally important.
That's what the evidence overwhelmingly suggests. And think about the environment again. The Marianas back then just didn't have the right kind of land for large-scale rice farming. No big flat river valleys. Mostly steep slopes, limestone, narrow beaches.
Which would make it hard to grow lots of it, reinforcing its special status.
Exactly. It likely cemented its role in ritual rather than agriculture. It's funny, you go there today, and rice is still kind of special, while breadfruit and taro are everywhere. It echoes.
Okay, so if they brought this special, hard-to-grow ceremonial rice, that really changes the picture of the voyage itself, doesn't it? It argues against them just drifting there by accident.
It really does. The idea of accidental drift was debated for a long time, but this is powerful evidence against it.
How so?
Because it shows these voyages were almost certainly planned, intentionally undertaken. Why else would you carefully transport not just survival tools, but specific, culturally significant plants like rice? Especially one that's not easy to grow where you're going.
You wouldn't bring something precious and difficult unless you meant to go there and had a plan for it.
Precisely. It supports what the linguist Robert Bluss proposed back in 2000. He argued the Chamorros must have been able to transport cultivated plants, including rice, from the Philippines to the Marianas 3,500 years ago.
And he inferred the whole migration was planned, not accidental.
Yes. This evidence really backs that up. These people were equipped, prepared, determined. They completed one of the most incredible sea voyages in human history. It was the longest known open ocean voyage of its time.
Just think about that. They weren't lost. They had a destination in mind, and they carried their culture, their sacred items with them, like this rice.
It's amazing. This tiny grain helps confirm the genetic and linguistic links, shows us this deep cultural meaning tied to the journey itself, and really highlights incredible human planning and resilience, carrying culture across thousands of kilometers of ocean.
So wrapping this up, this discovery of 3,500-year-old rice in Guam confirms these epic voyages from the Philippines were planned and reveals rice wasn't a staple, but a vital ceremonial item for the earliest Chamorro people.
A truly remarkable piece of the puzzle of Pacific settlement.
And it leaves us with something to think about. If you were setting out on a dangerous 2,300-kilometer voyage into the complete unknown, what precious thing, something not essential for basic survival, would you choose to bring? What would that choice say about your culture, your beliefs, and what you hope to build in a new home?